Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. Want to thank first Ken Quiethawk for his amazing intro. You can find him if you Google Nail Storytellers, and you'll find him and his website and all of his material. Fascinating, an amazing way of preserving history before the written word. So sort of dovetails into tonight. I have a really, really exciting show tonight. I'm very excited about it. It's a topic that I've been fascinated with for a very, very long time. I have Edward Malkowski here with me. He is a historical researcher with 25 years of research and 6 books to his credit so far. More in the works, I understand. And during the last 30 years, there's been a significant increase in interest about ancient history and the origins of civilization, much of which centers around Egypt and the pyramids. Tonight, we're going to be looking into some of the myths in ancient histories and find that truth is often a bit stranger and more enlightening than we have been led to believe. We're going to be looking into his book, Ancient Egypt, 39,000 BCE, The History, Technology, and Philosophy of Civilization. Now, traditional Egyptologists have long resisted the notion that the archaeological achievements of the ancient Egyptians required the existence of a much more sophisticated technology than would have existed at that time. Yet, no records exist explaining how, why, or who built Egypt's megalithic monuments and statues. The ancient Egyptians did, however, record that their civilization resided in the shadow of a kingdom of gods whose reign ended many thousands of years before their first dynasty. Just what and who was this civilization X that antiquity's most accomplished people revered as gods? I have Edward here, and I have to tell you, first off, his book is spectacular. Check it out. It's on Amazon, and the photographs in it are just phenomenal. They will blow your mind, but please wait until after the show to check it out. And the show will be up in archive, of course, on YouTube later on tonight. And if you enjoy what you hear and see, please make sure that you subscribe to it. We are pushing real hard to get to our 1,000 subscribers, and we're awfully close, so your help would be greatly appreciated. Edward, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here tonight.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, listen, your book reminded me of Fascination from when I was in the 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and I discovered I didn't discover it, but King Tut.
Yeah, they were tombs back then, weren't they? Pyramids were tombs.
Yeah, there were. Yeah, unfortunately, today when people talk of ancient history, it's usually history I can remember, which is scary as heck. What was it that, everybody I find that does a great deal of research into the ancient Egyptian stuff, and you're certainly one of those because most of your books do deal with that. I mean, my goodness, you got Sons of God, Daughters of Men, Before the Pharaohs, the Spiritual Technology of Ancient Egypt, 39,000 BC, and the Return of the Golden Age. So you're kind of tucked into that particular time frame as well. I have found that people who get this tucked in usually have a calling. So when did your fascination begin?
I was 8 years old.
Wow.
It was one of these days to kind of add to that a little bit. I was born a truth seeker and a writer. It just comes naturally to me. And when I was 8 years old, one morning in 1969 June, I woke up like I always do. And the sun was shining, and it was my kind of day. And I went into the bathroom to wash my face, comb my hair, like my mom taught me. And I was looking in the mirror. I had this sudden epiphany, and I distinctly remember it. I had this rush in my head of, why am I me? Why aren't I Randy Walcott or Roger Moe? They were two of my boyhood friends. Why am I me? And it was kind of a shocking thought that ran through me. And I just stared in the mirror for, 30 seconds, not very long. And then I shook it off and went outside and played. But it stuck with me forever. My mom grew up a Baptist and was always a Baptist, still is, as a matter of fact. She's almost 89 and she's still doing fine. And she would read me parts of the Bible while I was eating breakfast. This is junior high and high school. And I got fascinated by the book of Genesis, specifically the whole Noah flood story, where the intro to the Noah flood story is kind of disjointed from the actual narration of the flood itself, because it's talking about there were giants in the earth on those days. There was the Nephilim, and then it starts talking about there were men of renown, heroes of old. And, I said, wait a minute. Book is already ancient, but they're talking about another people that are even more ancient. So that really got me going. And then, it's another, not quite 10 years later. I was in college at the time, 81. Me and my friends, we went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the movie was fabulous. I loved the movie, and I was just mesmerized by the movie. And when we were out after the movie having drinks and talking about it, I just said it out loud to a friend named Barbara Leffelholtz, and I said, I'm going to write a book like this one of these days. And of course, then I was a few years later. I got married, had a family, had kids, had a career going in finance and in software development, and kind of sort of forgot about it. But in the early '90s, what really kicked it off real hard, I can't remember if it was 93, 94, somewhere in that area. John Anthony West aired his documentary, The Mystery of the Sphinx, on NBC. And that blew me away, and I've never looked back since. But
you've had the good fortune.
I want to know what actually happened, because history and the past are actually two different animals. Okay? History, and this is actually a bad thing about history, because each generation, tries to rewrite history. They go back and look back and they say, well, what should we change? And this has been going on for a very long time. And I want to know, there's a gazillion different ideas on our ancient ancestors and on the mythology of our ancient ancestors. Okay, I want to know what actually happened in the past to inspire these myths. And then why the big change? And around 300 or 400 BC, there's this huge change that the whole myths kind of stop, and then our mode of thinking, the reason, the logic here, I'm referring to the Greek philosophers of the 3rd and 4th century, that mode of thinking becomes commonplace, and then we move forward in time with, the Industrial Revolution and all that stuff. So I want to know just simply what happened and why.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and yet so many people, I can only speak for myself, but, I look at the Great Pyramid at Giza, and I look at the copper tools, and I say, no way. And yet history books have, talked about ramps. They've talked about all sorts of different ways for it to have been built, none of which made sense to me. And I think what finally got to me, I taught school for 25 years. So the teacher in me looks at all this and says, but we're teaching our children something that is not true. And how can the history, how can the history books continue to repeat this? I'd rather they say, we don't know.
Right.
That would make more sense to me.
This is why most young people hate history, because it's not taught correctly. History is a very boring, very date-oriented, time-oriented, progression-oriented discipline, and that's what they teach our kids. That's what they want to teach our kids. And if I would happen to be a professor of history in college or a history teacher in high school, I'd probably lose my job because I wouldn't be following the paradigm they want me to follow.
Well, no, I was lucky. I taught special ed, so I wasn't given an instruction as to what to teach. It was just teach them and keep them quiet.
Exactly.
I started teaching special ed in the 60s when it was just starting to be special ed. So it was like, just keep them quiet. and so
keep them quiet, pass them forward, right?
Oh yeah. But when I look at this material, I've always been fascinated with ancient Egypt, and of late, because I've been fortunate enough to be able to interview wonderful people, I keep saying I think it's older than this. I think the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid are older than the time frame given. I do believe that they predate the flood, and that there was another culture there.
Which flood?
And they weren't.
Barbara,
yeah.
Which flood?
Oh, well, let's see.
There's several.
They predate. Yeah, that's true. All right, it predates the last flood for sure. The one that went away about 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago.
Well, the most recent flood was around 3000 BC.
Mhm.
That was the actual the actual Noah's flood. That story, the whole Gilgamesh story, which is the actual true story. And that's an interesting point right there, because Noah's flood is really, the story in the Bible is not really very long. It may be, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 words. But when you go to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian story that goes back to, the 4th millennium, there you have a full story. You have about 25,000 words. So there's a whole lot more to read in Gilgamesh as there is in the Bible, and it's really kind of easy to see that the Bible story was is a descendant of the Gilgamesh story. So you're talking about the flood going back to around 10,000 BC.
Yes.
Is when you think the pyramids were built, or somewhere in that area.
Well, I'm thinking that, let me put it in a better context. I do believe that the pyramids were built before the last mass destruction, the last mass extinction. So there have been 5 of them, theoretically, 5 big ones anyhow. And I think the pyramid was built before the last one.
Yes. I think they knew it was coming. That's what I think.
Oh yeah.
And there's actually some good Arab historians that verify that. King Surid, one Arab historian says that King Surid had a dream that a planet was coming close to Earth and that he needed to build the pyramids. Have you ever heard that before?
Well, just from your book, yeah.
Yeah. So it's also, there is in Thebes, there's the Valley of the Kings. Now, what's really interesting about the Valley of the Kings is it actually is a valley. It's actually kind of a bowl. There's mountains, not really mountains, but hills. There's large hills around this valley, and when you look at it, it looks like someone broke through. I mean, lots of rock. They removed lots of rock to make an entrance into this bowl-like valley, and then they put, the tombs in the valley of the famous kings that we know of. But if you stop and think about it and look at the Valley of the Kings, the way it's designed, okay, it does not look like it was initially designed for tombs. It looks like it was initially designed to be, for lack of better words, a fallout shelter. And then later on, it was repurposed. To be a graveyard.
Well, isn't one of the reasons they didn't find King Tut's tomb was because water had there had been backwash and stuff of water that had filled in all of the area around where his tomb was?
Correct. King Tut was a young man when he died, and they hastily got a tomb for him and buried him. And then there were those floods coming through, and it kind of messed up the scenery. So his tomb became a hidden tomb where the grave robbers couldn't find it. And it's fortunate for us that happened.
Well, because you're into this stuff, one of the things that I have always believed was that there was another chamber that they hadn't discovered yet, and they are now saying that they think that there is another chamber in there. Have you done any research on that?
No, I have not done any research on that, but I don't doubt that that's true because here again, the Arab historians, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a physician. He was actually a doctor. This is around the 10th or 11th or 12th century. Okay, he was living in Baghdad, and he moved to Cairo. Of course, this is well after the Arab invasion, so the Arab state had already been set up, and they already had their own civilization going. Anyway, this doctor moved from Baghdad to Cairo, and when he arrived in Cairo, even at that time, this is 1,000 years ago, the pyramids were actually famous because this doctor wanted to go check out the pyramids, and that was one of the first things he did when he arrived in Cairo. And on Giza, he said that the ruins of the Giza Plateau were a day's walk in each direction.
Wow.
Now, all that is underneath probably, I don't know, a quarter mile or a half mile of sand now. But, that's what he said. So I don't doubt it.
Well, when... Now it's accepted that the Great Pyramid did have a coating on it that of course has been stripped away and used all over the place. But that when Napoleon came through Egypt, a lot of that coating, a lot of the white granite, was it? Whatever it was, whatever the coating was.
It was limestone.
That was on the limestone.
It was limestone.
The limestone had hieroglyphs all over it, and that there was he had a scholar with him who spent a decade at least copying all of the hieroglyphs down. He couldn't read them, but he copied them all down. Now, I don't know whatever became of his notebooks, because I did research this, and there were notebooks that he did, that were definitely compiled. And then, of course, the Egyptians started to make patios and pave their buildings and stuff, and all of the sheathing is gone. But that in many places in Egypt, that if you actually have found a piece that was part of that sheathing, that if you look on the other side of it, there are hieroglyphs. And I think in some place it said that on the outside of the pyramid were written, the mysteries and all sorts of and knowledge
right.
and everything. And
right. Well, that's long before Napoleon, but yeah, you're correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
because I know there were notebooks. Go ahead.
Well, it's to the best of my knowledge, the limestone casings of the Great Pyramid, they were removed when the Arabs rebuilt Cairo after an earthquake. So that the hieroglyphs, and yes, that's correct. From what I understand, there was hieroglyphic writing on all four sides of the Great Pyramid. But that was removed sometime around the 10th, or again, here, same time period, 10th, 11th, 12th century. That was removed so they could use the stone to rebuild Cairo. So,
God, don't you wonder?
There's, well, yeah, I mean, if that did exist into modern times where the hieroglyphs were there, certainly someone would have copied all them down. And I don't know. I don't know anyone that has any hieroglyphic writings from the actual casing stones of the pyramid.
Yeah,
it would be
unfortunately,
fantastic.
Yeah. It was my late husband that it was my late husband that told me about it, and he gave me a source, and I just, it just kind of went. It didn't go in one ear and out the other. It stayed in my head for a while, so I remembered it, but I can't remember.
Right.
Where, because I swear to you, he said someone had notebooks of some of the hieroglyphs for sure.
No, I don't think so. I have his book. I have Napoleon's book. It's a great big thick book that he had done when he was in Egypt, and I've never seen anything about the hieroglyphs on the Great Pyramid there. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff from all kinds of temples and places and pyramids.
Oh yeah.
It's a great big thick book, but no, nothing about the hieroglyphs.
Wow. Well, the pictures that you've got in your book of the rubble, and you call it rubble, but some of those stones they're bigger than a man. They're huge. They're
yes. But when you look at it from a distance, it's rubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually surprised me quite a bit because I had watched just about every documentary on ancient Egypt and the pyramids, starting in the early to mid '90s, all the way through, for 10, 15 years, and I had never seen the Giza Plateau like it really exists, because they only show you what they seem to want to show you on TV. You get pictures of the pyramids, you get pictures of the Sphinx and inside and stuff, but they never pan back and show you what's on the ground everywhere. And just the amount of granite, of red granite on the ground, is phenomenal. It's actually mind-boggling that there was a lot going on there at one time, for sure.
Absolutely, and there's no way that as advanced as Egypt became technologically. Now there is a hieroglyph in. I don't know whose tomb it is, but it does appear that they were holding a light bulb. So they technologically they were wise. They were knowledgeable. They certainly understood astrology, but to have the ability to cut those stones and create the huge statues that they did. They just, I mean, it looks like it should have been done like today, except we don't have the tools to do half that stuff.
Well, no. I'm a big picture guy. Okay, let's look at just the Great Pyramid for 60 seconds. Okay. If we were to build the Great Pyramid today, and there's actually a report that I got a hold of. It was done in Europe. It was a corporate construction company that did this cost estimate. If we were to build the Great Pyramid today, okay, and use the exact same materials the ancient Egyptians used, this here I'm referring to the actual red granite, and I'm referring to the white, I think it's Turek limestone for the casing stones, and the cheaper limestone for the core of the pyramid. If we were to use those same materials, do you know how much it would cost for us to build one Great Pyramid? It's a staggering number.
Yeah.
$400 billion. That's what it would cost. Okay. Now, if we were able to cheat and substitute materials, in other words, dump the red granite, dump the special limestone, just use whatever we can come close, to mimic that, we can get that $400 billion price tag down to about $40 billion. But still, $40 billion for this one building. Okay, if a civilization is going to do this, they have a very good reason why they're doing it, and it's not going to be a tomb. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Because spending that kind of money, taking those, I'm going to be an economist here for just a second, taking that kind of money out of your society and putting it into a building, you have to have a good reason, and it has to have utility for the civilization. Because if there's no good reason to do that, you're not going to have a civilization any longer, because the people will rebel and find another king.
Well, not only that, but the manpower that they're saying it took is unconscionable. It just can't have been.
Yes, and well, shoot, there's problems with that too. Okay, let's say that they just use pure manpower, just men and arms and legs. Some of these stones, you can't get enough men around them to get the stones where they're supposed to go. That's another big problem.
Not only that, but going timeline back, theoretically, this was built before the wheel. So, I mean, how could they possibly, they have pictures of, men dragging, some of the movies and things like that. They don't talk about, them using any sort of carts or anything. Yet in some of the later kingdoms, they did have chariots, they did have wheels, but nothing that could carry anything of the weight of what those stones were. To say nothing of getting them from where they were quarried. But so I'm all with you. I'm all in with your Civilization X. Absolutely all in, because it makes perfect sense that whoever created the Great Pyramid had to have had the technology to make it. And I mean, we build huge structures, but nothing like this. And I've often said, when I wax, philosophical, that we have the Great Pyramid that has stood for thousands and thousands of years, but none of the structures today, they'd all be dust except for Mount Rushmore.
That's
Mount Rushmore
correct.
is
and maybe Hoover Dam will last a bit longer too. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's absolutely correct.
Well, parts of Hoover Dam probably, but
right.
So it had to be a civilization that had the technology to do it. And if that's the case, they keep going back to it was Khufu built it. And no, he didn't. And the only reason they say Khufu built it is because of graffiti that's in a place that's almost impossible to get to. So
yeah, and that's been proven false too. Anyway.
Yeah, that was what the archaeologists did the graffiti, or somebody.
Yeah,
did.
there's a book. I did a presentation with the Edgar Casey Foundation a couple of years ago, and Scott Crichton was there. He's another author, lives in Scotland. He did a book called The Great Pyramid Hoax, and I watched his presentation. He gave his before mine, and he has done a super duper job of analyzing this hieroglyph. It's above the king's chamber. It's a very hard place to get, and he did an analysis of it and pretty much proved that it's a forgery. The guy, I can't remember the guy's name. I want to say Carrington, but it sounds something like that. A British explorer and archaeologist. He wanted to have a find under his name. You know, he wanted to be, you know, kind of famous in a way. And according to Scott Crichton, he actually had that hieroglyph painted up there so he could take credit for the find.
Well, I would believe that. I mean, listen, if I'm going to build anything that big, you may be very sure my name is going to be in neon on the outside, not in graffiti in the rubble.
Right.
I mean, so what fascinated me with your book is that you give an explanation as to what the pyramid might have been used for, because it certainly was not a burial chamber, and there's no hieroglyphs, there's no writing, there's nothing inside, and
there's no hieroglyphs, there's no corpses, no sarcophagi found in any of the true pyramids. They're all empty, and furthermore, we know what ancient Egyptian tombs look like. We found enough of them that we know. And the ancient Egyptian tomb, okay, is constructed like a home. Okay.
Yeah.
The body goes in there, and in the sarcophagus, there's furniture, there's amulets, there's jewelry, there's stuff put in there for the deceased, because they put his possessions in there because they don't want him to reincarnate, okay? They want him to transcend to the sky in the netherworld and become for his ka to become one with his ba, so he can live eternity as a star. That's the whole purpose of the tomb. And that's why they mummified him. So we know what Egyptian tombs look like. They look like homes where you have your stuff. None of the pyramids resemble anything like an actual Egyptian tomb. They're totally different. So there's really no reason to go there. Now, why the first explorers made that assumption that they're tombs is because in the 4th, 5th, 3rd century, when the Nile Valley was repopulated by the descendants of the truly ancient Egyptians, they assumed the same thing, that the pyramids must be tombs. See, the pyramids were closed. You could not even get in them. All you could do was look at them. So what the first dynastic Egyptians did is they made graveyards on the west and the east side of the Great Pyramid, and they started burying their dead there because they thought it was tombs. So
but all of those graves are underground.
Yes, they're in mastabas. Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is how our minds work as people. If we don't know, we try and make a pattern. So when the Europeans came in there in the 18th century, in the 19th century, You know, they saw the graveyards at the east side and the west side, and the graveyards, you know, at different areas of the pyramids. They just automatically assumed, because there were graveyards there, that the pyramids were there. You know, it's just bad reasoning, is what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've cleared out the fact that it was absolutely not a tomb, never was. You know, it's sort of like, okay, so what was it for? I mean, there's a descending passageway that goes down below that now has water in it. No reason for what that is. There's the Queen's Chamber, and there's the Great Gallery, and there's the King's Chamber.
Right.
And you know, have you done any research on that? They say that there's another chamber, but they haven't broken through to it.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures in the articles that there's another chamber up there somewhere, but Egypt is highly political, and getting permission to work there is really hard to do. It's really become a money thing now with the Egyptians, so it's kind of sad.
Well, it's their tourist trade, you know.
Compared to the, yeah, it is, and they make a lot of. I mean, yeah, the tourist trade is their number one source of money, and so they got to take care of it and protect it, and all that. And that's fine.
Well, I'm all for your theory, because I think it's a good one. So, want to explain what you feel it was meant to be?
Sure. I would love to. Chris Dunn gets the credit. Okay, he was the first guy that I know of, and I know Chris, by the way. He was the first guy to say, "This looks like a device." That's what it actually looks like, a device. And of course, he comes up. This is going into the late '90s. He comes up with the Giza power plant. I'm sure you've heard of the book.
Yep.
Where it was to be a device to generate power. Well, yeah, but it's not really the power that we think about. You know, here in modern times, we think of power, we think of electricity, we think of high power. And Chris, yeah, gets the credit for putting that theory forward. But I've been there and I've looked at it, and I have a slightly different theory. And this theory hinges on the underground portion of the pyramid. There's a gentleman lives up in the state of Washington who was a marine engineer, and he read Edward Kunkel's books on the Great Pyramid, who thought they were a water pump. But of course, Kunkel thought the entire pyramid was a water pump, where you had water coming out the north shaft and the south shaft of the King's Chamber,
like a huge sprinkler. Yeah.
Yeah, like a huge sprinkler, and that really didn't make any sense. And no, it didn't. But John Cadman is the guy I'm talking about. He started looking at the pictures of the underground chamber below the pyramid, and got as many pictures as he could find, and he knew what he was looking at. He told me that he was looking at what he thought old-fashioned ram pump. Before we had electricity, there was a way to pump water. If you had water at a high point in the ground and you wanted to pump that water somewhere else, all you had to do was create a device that is a shaft with a piston in it that pumps the water. All right, gravity runs it. So once you got this piston moving, it'll never stop, because the pressure that builds up in the chamber below it, once it releases the water, it'll push the piston back up so it can take in more water, and it'll just keep going up and down, letting more water in, working on the pressure from the chamber and the force of gravity. So John Cadman did a fantastic job. He actually made models. He made several models to prove his theory, and this is actually the only scientific experiment or approach to the Great Pyramid that I've ever heard of or know about. And yeah, history also corroborates this because the Great Pyramid was initially right next to the Nile River. And around the pyramid, they had built a wall for a moat. So there was water right next to the pyramid. So they had devised a scheme to take water and move it. Obviously, you have to have water for crops. So using that part of the Great Pyramid is a way to water your crops. And everywhere I went to the pyramids, this is on Giza, Abu Sur, Abu Ghraib, that is all about the water. There's granite trowels coming out of the sands on the Giza Plateau. There's long granite trowels at Abu Sur coming down from the temple all the way to the base of the sand dune. So one thing for sure is they were using it to move water. But there's another really fascinating thing that they were doing. And John Cadman gets the credit for this work, being the marine engineer that he is. He noticed that the way they built this pumping system in the underground subterranean chamber, that it was creating a compression wave throughout the pyramid, a vibration. Okay, and the way it was designed is this vibration was moving straight up from the subterranean chamber, up through the queen's chamber into the king's chamber. And as you know, the king's chamber is all granite, and granite has quartz, and quartz granite is sensitive to vibration. There's a piezoelectric effect to it. So it was creating some type of energy in that king's chamber, and it was moving out through the north and south shafts, I think, as a sound wave. Well, that's what a pressure wave is. It's a sound wave.
Yeah.
So they were creating some type of vibration in the sky, a bubble. There's probably some electromagnetism to it. But my initial theory is, since the water was, to water the crops, then they would be creating this magnetic field, or this electromagnetic field, this bubble, to make very low frequencies and extremely low frequencies, which are in the air at all times from thunderstorms. They were pulling these things to the ground to fertilize their crops. This is actually modern day science. Some of the agricultural studies are looking at different ways of fertilizing crops, and you can use BLF and ELF to actually inoculate and fertilize your crops and make them grow faster and bigger. And that just seemed like, looking at the actual pyramid itself, what it does, it seemed to me like a logical conclusion. If you're getting ready for a catastrophe and you want your civilization to continue, you have to have food and water.
Yeah.
So to make it through this upcoming catastrophe, okay, that would be a good thing to do to make sure your civilization continues. And that's my theory.
That's a good one. Now, there are 8 pyramids that go along the west side of the Nile. And
that's correct.
Are they all linked in order to do the same thing?
Yes, they are. The Great Pyramid is the actual engine.
Okay.
But if you will notice, all the pyramids, the Giza is the northernmost pyramid. There actually is one other pyramid 5 miles to the north is called Abu Rawash. It was built on a plateau about 500 feet up in the air, but it was not finished. They stopped work on it. And it's my logic is they found a better site, which was Giza. And why Giza was a better site is because there's water running underneath Giza. And moving water through stone creates electricity, creates current, electrical current. So they moved the site for the engine from Abu Rawash to the Giza Plateau because it was a better situation for them. That's why they stopped work on Abu Rawash. But anyway, to get back to your question, yes, all the pyramids were tied together. And as you move south from the Great Pyramid, each pyramid further south gets less high and less high, get a little bit shorter. Well, what they were doing is they were pulling this electromagnetic field to the south, and they were linking up all the pyramids to create, I guess for lack of better words, to create a force field bubble over the Nile Valley where they were living and growing their food.
Okay. And I'm right with you in all of this, and then the question comes back to who were they, and were they preparing for a cataclysm of some sort, and this was their way to protect and not prevent it, but to protect the population from it?
I'm convinced they were. It's Surid. It's one of the Arab historians. I'm going to see if I can find this real quick here, because this is a really good thing to talk about. Yeah, here it is, right here. Okay. The Arab historian Ibrahim ibn Wasif Shah. Okay. He says that the Giza pyramids were built by an antediluvian king named Surid, or Sarid, however it's pronounced, who saw in a dream a huge planet falling to Earth at the time when the heart of the lion would reach the first minute of the head of cancer. So this being an actual historical thing, I can't call it a fact, because this was written 1,000 years ago, if not more. But this is some of the legends behind it. And furthermore, there's no documents coming out of the Old Kingdom. I know there's the Old Kingdom, and then there's the Middle Kingdom, and then there's the New Kingdom. There's three different parts of ancient Egyptian civilization that we know of, and there's nothing from the Old Kingdom. There's no records of any kind, and there were like 7 or 8 dynasties in that first Old Kingdom. I mean, that's a head scratcher right there. Okay, why are there no records coming out of the early dynasties? There's records coming out of the early dynasties of Sumer in Mesopotamia. They have some records from their first dynasty, but there's nothing from Egypt. My hypothesis is that all the grand temples and pyramids associated with the Old Kingdom were already there in 3000 BC, when the population got large enough to repopulate the Nile Valley. And
I totally agree.
And they were the Egyptians. But that's actually our word. I don't think they called themselves Egyptians. Egypt is actually a Greek word. They called their land the Black Land, is the actual English term for it, probably because of the soil, the fertile soil there. But see, we don't listen to history. the ancient Egyptians themselves claim that they're, well, that's where I got the title of the book, 39,000 BC. The ancient Egyptians themselves, in the Turin Papyrus, which is housed in the museum at Turin, Italy, there's a king's list, and the modern day king's list starts with King Mings of the first dynasty, first king of the first dynasty, 3000 BC. However, the Egyptians themselves say that reigns up to the Shamsu Hor lasted for 23,200 years before Mings. And before the reigns of the Shamsu Hor, before that, the gods ruled for 13,420 years. So this is the own ancient Egyptians writing, and they're saying their civilization goes back 39,000 years. So why should modern-day historians believe that they're lying about it? Well, the answer is they're lying about it because we can't explain that.
Well, I think that at least these days, I listen to myths and stuff like that with a completely different perception, because you do begin to understand that people can only describe things from their own frame of reference, and it's like today. There are so many things that we don't understand, but we make up the story to explain it, so it makes it easier to talk about, I guess. But this takes you back to the antediluvian culture that becomes your civilization X, and it's sort of like they in many ways were trying to they were trying to leave information to those who would come after them about what things to look out for, and explain why they were doing things. It never occurred to them that people wouldn't understand, and that's why
that's
I
the
love...
crazy part right there, isn't it? That's the crazy part. That some people 5,000 years ago, actually a lot longer than that. It's what, 12,000 years ago. People 12,000 years ago built this wonderful, beautiful structures on the Nile River, and they designed it so someone with intelligence could understand who they were, what they were doing, and why. And we have failed on that matter.
I know, and it blows me away thinking that in another 12,000 years, well, for instance, the probes that we've sent out into space, we've put graphic stuff on it in hopes that people would understand. And this blows my mind. On one of them, we literally put a record on it, knowing that future generations would know what to do with a record. My grandson wouldn't know what to do with a record. Maybe he would, but it's sort of like 12,000 years. No, I don't think that the element of what a record is something that would enter into anybody's consciousness. Hopefully we will have evolved way beyond that, and we won't have gone through another mass extinction. But I just it blows my mind that people aren't understanding that there was a culture that was way back, and and they saw this coming too. That's the one thing that we were talking about earlier, that they were they had such a wonderful understanding of astrology that they knew an event was coming and were trying to prepare for it. And obviously some people survived, but not the knowledge of what they had, the technology, the philosophy, the spirituality. none of that stuff came through.
Well, the philosophy and spirituality did. That did come through. It's been hidden for a very long time. But the whole philosophy and spirituality of the ancient Egyptians, that does come through. It comes through Egypt, and it existed in ancient Egypt. The problem is modern day scholars, and here I'm really pointing the finger at the 19th century Egyptologists and classical scholars. They kind of rewrote history. There's actually two different models of ancient Egypt, or of the ancient world for that matter. Okay, there's the pre-classical ancient model of the ancient world, which existed prior to the 15th century. Okay, and then there's the modern model of ancient history that was kind of concocted in the 18th and 19th century, and that is our modern day model of what ancient history should be. So there's two different things going on here, and what I like to do, I like to get away from the modern model and try and get back to the original ancient model, which means you have to read all of the ancient philosophers and historians, Diodorus, Herodotus, Pythagoras, different people like that, especially the Greeks, and then there's a few others, because they will give you the ancient model of how they believe things were, okay, as opposed to our modern, newly concocted model of how things are supposed to be. So, I mean, just right now I'm working on a book where I've been using a lot of textbooks that were written in the late 19th and early 20th century. And why these books are so good is because the first men that went to Egypt, or to Mesopotamia for that matter, they had no preconceived ideas of what they were doing. Okay, they actually translated and wrote down things just like the ancient Egyptians or the ancient Sumerians or Akkadians actually wrote them down. And to read books like that, you get a totally different take on things. Here's a really good example right now that I've been working on today. The ancient Mesopotamians, okay, they knew of the constellations, the zodiacal constellations, okay, but there's the way people speak, and this is today as well as, 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, we have different words for different things, okay, and we use one word for many things, all right?
Yeah.
So there's the constellation Scorpio, right? Of course. But besides using that word scorpion to designate the constellation of stars, they were using that word scorpion in different ways, referring to different natural occurring phenomenon and to planets. So it really muddies the water, okay? The scorpion is referring to the constellation, but the scorpion can also refer to lightning, flaming fire, the planet Venus. So, the Sumerians and the Akkadians, the Assyrians, they did not create a tutorial for us to work on and go off of. They just figured everyone would be speaking Sumerian or Akkadian for the rest of, world history, which didn't happen to be the case. So these first scholars, they struggled with translating these texts, the hieroglyphs as well as, cuneiform texts. And they explain what they're doing as they're trying to figure it out. Whereas when you read a modern textbook, they just tell you, okay? The number one text for Egypt is the Oxford History of Egypt. I have a copy of it. I've looked through it and read parts of it, but it tells me absolutely nothing.
Well, I can believe that.
I haven't opened it in years because it doesn't really give you anything. It just gives you what they think it is, and they won't go into any mysterious area to try and give you a bigger picture of
I found
Egypt.
that Strong's Concordance does take you back to the original language that the material was written in and what it meant at that particular time. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, I sure am. That's what I cut my teeth on back in 1982, 83. That's
did you know
the Hebrew language, though.
Yeah. Did you know he did a cyclopedia as well?
I did not know that. I know he had I'm very familiar with the concordance. But I didn't know he had an encyclopedia.
Yeah, he did 1832, and I've got all 10 volumes of it on disc. If you want to, I'll share it with you if you'd like.
Wow, that'd be awesome. Wow, 10 volumes. Wow.
10 volumes. We'll talk after the show. I have often thought that a lot of the huge statues, especially at the entrance to places and everything, I think they were life-size. I don't think they were just made big to be made big. I think they were life-size.
You think they were life-size?
Yeah.
Well, I've been kicking around this theory in my head. It's not really a theory. It's kind of, no, it is a theory because there is some science behind it. That's true. Have you ever heard of the expanding Earth theory?
Probably.
It's where our planet is actually growing, getting larger.
Really? Okay, you
Yeah.
got me.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm going to throw another one at you, and it directly applies to this. Okay, dinosaurs. We're all familiar with dinosaurs. We all love dinosaurs. Kids love dinosaurs. I've been to Utah. I've seen dinosaur mounds. I've seen hills cut in half. Nothing but dinosaur bones in them. Huge bones. Well, physicists tell us today that those dinosaurs, it's impossible for them to be alive today. Impossible. Because of their structure. Okay?
Yeah.
Our gravity, the way they're built, how big they are, how tall they are, how much they weigh, it's not possible for them to even be alive today because our gravity is too strong for them. They wouldn't be able to get up off the ground and raise their heads.
Yeah, but didn't we at one time have either a double or a triple atmosphere?
Probably a double atmosphere, but not a triple.
Okay.
Okay, and what that double atmosphere is, we of course Earth has its own atmosphere. Okay, and when it was a moon of Saturn, inside Saturn's plasma sphere, then that was a second atmosphere that created this lush, beautiful, 75-degree warm world with mist everywhere and plants everywhere. But that's way long ago, and it could have been. It could have been smaller then. But there was a guy in the 1940s and 50s. He actually noticed on the globe that the continents should fit together because they look like they should. Well, what he found out is they don't. Not on your standard globe size. But if you keep the continents the same size they are, and shrink the globe, at a certain point, the continents start to fit together real good. And when you get so small, they fit together perfectly. And this is where he comes up with the expanding Earth theory. And of course, we have settled science today. Einstein and Newton have figured everything out, so there's no need to worry about electromagnetism or an expanding Earth or anything like that, right? I'm being funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that what fascinates me so much is that it makes sense to me that a culture as wise and as advanced as the culture that actually did create the Great Pyramid and a lot of the other edifices too, was trying to leave a message and give a warning. And,
yes, they were. Yes.
And it seems to me that that's a warning that we should pay attention to. We talked about how way back the planets weren't in the same orbits as they are.
Right.
That everything was sort of wobbly. But it also I do feel strongly that let's talk a little bit about what really caused the last extinction.
What actually caused the last extinction? The planets of our solar system, they were originally orbiting the sun together as a group. Okay, and here this is where we have to shift gears, and we have to talk about dark matter and dark energy.
Okay.
Because it's pertinent to what I'm going to say. In modern science, our astrophysicists have figured out that 99% of the universe is made up of dark matter and dark energy. Right? Well, the problem with that is they don't have a clue as to what dark matter or dark energy is. Okay? But on the other hand, plasma physicists, whom your standard astrophysicist will not talk to, your plasma physicists understand, because their expertise is in electromagnetism. And they know that 99% of the universe is made up of plasma. And we're not talking about blood plasma. We're talking about a fourth state of matter where all atoms are so hot that they have been divorced from their electron shells, and they're free-floating ions in space. That's what dark matter and dark energy actually is. So space is electric. Actually, everything is electric. We are electric.
Right.
Have you ever kissed your husband and got shocked?
Yes.
It's winter time, and you're scooting your feet a little bit as you're going to say bye to your honey. This happens to me all the time during the winter. When I'm going out, I'll go over to kiss my wife, and actually, at times before our lips even meet, like they're a half an inch apart. I can actually see the arc jump from my lip to her lip and shock us both. That is
shocking.
A principle of, yes, that's shocking, isn't it? That is a principle, that is a fundamental principle of our universe that is totally scalable. It is good as small as you want to go or as large as you want to go. And the point I'm making here is that everything is electric. Now, why we don't notice it is because we actually live between two electromagnetic plates. There's one below our feet, and there's one above our heads, okay? There's the atmosphere above our heads and the ground to our feet. The whole grounding thing that all electricians know about is there for a very good reason. And that very good reason is, okay, things need to be grounded to the ground because there is no ground in space, and everything has an electrical capacity. Everything has a magnetic field. Even we humans have a magnetic field. It's so small and so subtle, it's damn near not noticeable. But you've got the Kirlian photography and the oral photography, and they're kind of trying to get in that direction. Of course, they're called pseudoscientists and all that, so that blows that away. But no, the truth is, and this is actual astrophysics. I mean, you can read about it tonight on Google. There's no ground in space, and every celestial body has an electric potential and has a magnetic field. Okay. Well, what happens when one planet gets close to another planet, and just like me and my wife, we have different electrical potentials in our bodies, and mine became greater than hers because I screwed my feet across the floor. The same thing exists in space. So when you get one planet coming close to another planet, okay, and one planet has a much higher charge in its electrical potential, the other planet has to equalize. They have to equalize their charge in order to be friendly. So what happens is you have this monster lightning strike from one planet to the next. And when I say lightning strike, I'm not talking about a thunderstorm that we have today. I'm talking about a lightning strike that's 10 miles wide and is in the millions of amperage. So it's actually melting the ground and creating sonic booms and mushroom clouds. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. That's what got everything going. That's what caused all the problems, was unstable planets trying to find peaceful orbits around a new sun.
So what caused in several cultures prior to disaster striking, they talk about the Eye of Horus, the blue Eye of Horus, the blue planet in the sky. It seems to have foretold, horrendous things happening. What causes the blue star? Yeah.
That's Venus. Venus is actually the devil.
Okay.
Venus is actually Lucifer. I believe that's out of Isaiah chapter 32. I could be wrong about that. But it talks about Lucifer, you are the morning star. You thought you were more beautiful than God, therefore you've been cast down to earth, and 2/3 of the stars have gone with you, et cetera, et cetera. So are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about the planet Venus. Is what they're talking about. The Mesopotamians actually, here I'm shifting gears and going from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Sorry about that, but
no, that's okay.
The Egyptians were very cryptic and very esoteric in the way they described things in their literature, which is actually fascinating to me, because it tells me they had some different mode of thought, the way they thought about things.
Yeah.
And the Mesopotamians. The Mesopotamians are more like us in modern times. The Mesopotamians were pretty much straightforward on stuff. Yes, they had their myth, and yes, to modern folks, their myth sounds really goofy. But if you can get past the myth and learn the myth and learn what the symbols mean, and remember, as far as myth goes, the gods were planets. The planets were gods. That's the end of the story. That's what we're talking about here. The Mesopotamians actually knew the colors of the planets, and they knew that because they could see them, and they actually built those colors into their temple at Eridu and Nippur in Mesopotamia. So we know that they know that they could see the planets and they knew what they look like. And yes, Venus was typically a blue-green planet.
How did they know the colors?
They could see them. They were right there.
They were that
just
close.
like we see the moon. They were that close.
Oh. Wow.
Yep. Well, it's, if you want to talk about creation, and actually creation is really not a very good word to use, because creation is actually a continuing thing. So when we're talking about, when the Mesopotamians are talking about creation, or when the Egyptians are talking about creation, they're not really talking about, and I hate to use this phrase, but I'm going to go ahead and use it because we all understand it. They're not talking about the Big Bang.
No.
Okay.
No.
They're talking about a specific, and I want to use the word recreation as opposed to a new creation. They're talking about a recreation of our planet. But the Mesopotamians were pretty much straightforward with it, where the Egyptians weren't. And they tell us pretty much exactly what happened as far as the plans go. And I kind of got lost in some digression there.
That's okay. I'm fine with that. I was right with you. There are a lot of mythologies connected to different cultures that all seem to talk to the same point, that they don't talk about, the creation is, they describe it in their own terms, but they all seem to know a lot more about how we came to be than our science today does. And it's sort of sad that people aren't paying attention to, that old saying, those who don't pay attention to history are doomed to repeat it.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
And it does feel as though, while we don't have a blue star in the sky at the moment, and I'm not saying that we are due for a mass extinction. I mean, we could blow ourselves up, but the mass extinctions that have been in the past have not been because, humanity has done it. It's because of, some huge cosmic whatever, whether it's a meteor hitting the Earth and melting, the ice caps and all of that stuff, or whether it's, the destabilization of our rotation and things like that. I know the Native Americans have been talking about the fact that the sky is wobbly these days, which to me would suggest that there is some sort of shifting going on universally, cosmically, whatever you want to call it, and that there are going to be changes as far as our weather system and our environment as a whole. And if people can't see that change, then they're blind to what's going on around us. And it's sort of like
the first warning sign, right? The first warning sign is going to be an increase in auroral activity in the evening. And when we start to see an aurora during the daytime, that's when we really need to be worried.
Oh, yeah.
That's the first siren. Because when something's getting close to it, it's going to have a magnetic field about it. And if it's hot and throwing off flares, these flares are space plasma. It's ionized particles, high energy, high moving particles, and that's going to affect Earth and Earth's magnetic field, and create really brilliant, fantastic aurora borealis and aurora australis. That's that's, if the sky's wobbly, I know where they're going with that.
I mean, I'm not saying that I see, something hitting us tomorrow, yet it could, but, it's just, it feels as though history is trying to warn us of something. Whether it's be on the lookout for something coming hurtling at you through space, whether it is an EMP pulse that comes from a star exploding, or amazing sunspots that destabilize our atmosphere, or any number of things. You don't see science, at least you don't hear about it. Maybe it's going on, but you don't hear about them trying to protect the planet. All you hear about, unfortunately, is political stuff, and how, cows having gas is the reason the ice caps are melting, and that's just not so. So
I'm not sure there was an ice age.
Well, yeah, that's you've got a point there. Although there are places where it does appear that something has been dragged, and but they seem to blame everything they can't explain on glacier erratica. And
well, yeah, but there's a huge problem with glaciers. There's a huge problem with the ice age. This is just common sense stuff. They claim that there's like a mile of ice here in North America. A mile.
Where?
We're talking right where I am right now. I live in Central Illinois, and that's kind of like the edge of the glacier. Back 20,000 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Now there's a huge problem with that, because you have to have precipitation that's turning into ice and snow to accumulate for a mile deep. How's that happen? That's pretty difficult. That's really difficult, because you have to have warm, moist air, water vapor, and you have to have that water vapor being chilled to create first ice, then snow. Well, how do we put together a weather system to create a mile of snow? And that's difficult.
Could it have something to do with the atmosphere being destabilized?
Well, the best theory I have heard on it is that when our planet experiences intense auroral activity, all right, what happens is the aurora actually becomes permanent. Okay.
Ooh.
So the inflow of charged particles and dust, coming into our planet, there's two areas at the North Pole and the South Pole where there is a chink in our electromagnetic armor. The astrophysicists call it the horn, and they call it the horn because this area of space is, and this has to do with magnetic lines. The magnetic lines actually create a horn. It's flared at the top and narrow at the bottom. And anyway, the plasma follows these horns into Earth and settles in the North Pole and the South Pole. So what's happening to create these so-called ice ages is that there's all this cosmic dust and high-energy particles coming in. Well, the ionized plasma is actually matter. It's just all broken apart. So anyway, the plasma will accumulate at our North and South Pole, and dust will accumulate as well, This will act as a dense cloud structure, and prevent sunlight from coming in. So this ring around the planet at the top and at the bottom is going to be very cold. Okay? But remember, it's a ring. Okay? And the top is clear and underneath it is clear. So what's going on is the moist air is moving up, and it's moving north to the very top of the planet. And this is where the nice warm air is going to get put into the freezer, and it's going to condense and become ice and snow and fall straight down. So you have this cycle. So you have this cycle of warm air moving out of the oceans, the North Pacific and the North Atlantic, and it's moving up to the North Pole, moving through that hole, and the warm air is getting frozen and then falling to the ground. It's a cycle. Okay, but in order for that cycle, it's the same cycle we have today with normal snows. Okay. But it's exacerbated because of the auroral cloud that's, making it cold in a ring around the North Pole, but the air's still getting up there and creating all the snow. So that's the best story I've heard.
Interesting. Well, I want to get back to our Civilization X because it fascinates me in that, first of all, I do believe they were trying to leave a message. And I do believe that in a lot of the quote-unquote myths or legends or whatever, that they do talk about information and wisdoms being buried beneath the pyramid or the Sphinx. And I think, I can't remember, but I think somewhere, I think it was your book where you said that the Sphinx was probably older than the Great Pyramid.
Most likely, yes. Yeah.
But what gets me is something that I have not heard or read anyplace else, but you show it in your book, in that assuming that Civilization X built the pyramid, and I think it probably did, they had use of saws, and there are saw marks in a lot of the quote-unquote rubble that is around the Great Pyramid. And I don't understand why archaeologists haven't seen that before.
Oh, they've seen it. It's not possible to miss it. I mean, as a tourist, I roamed the Giza Plateau for 2 days, and there's saw marks. There's saw marks. There's surfaces as smooth as glass everywhere. You just got to know where to look. They're out in the open. The best place to look is the north side of the Great Pyramid. There is a black basalt patio there. Okay. And it's been scavenged, and it's really serendipitous to us that it has been scavenged, because what the builders of the Great Pyramid did is, if they had mistakes that were made on rocks, they wouldn't throw that rock away. They would repurpose it. They'd find a way to use it because it costs money, And so what they did is, like, if they made a mistake on this one, they'd cut it down a little bit and use it as a patio stone here. Okay. So anyway, when the black basalt patio on the north side of the Giza Pyramid, Great Pyramid, was scavenged, they start removing first the edges from the patio.
Yeah.
And then they just start taking more and more wherever they want, whatever they need. Well, this exposes a lot of mistakes made by the construction crew. And there they are, saw marks, plain as day, looking right at them. It's jaw-dropping.
You can see the slice marks, and you have a stone you called the Rosetta Stone.
Well, it's
like a Rosetta Stone.
like a Rosetta Stone. Yeah,
Okay.
It's another form of the Rosetta Stone. That's the stone at Abu Rawash. That's a phenomenal
amazing.
story. That's amazing. And what's really cool about the story about Abu Rawash and this new Rosetta Stone is Abu Rawash touched until the mid-90s. It was a great big mound of dirt, of sand. And a French and German archaeology team came in there in the mid-90s and cleaned it all up. They removed all the dirt, they removed everything, and they took some things down, and they found this slab of stone that's approximately 3 feet long by 2 feet wide, about 18 inches thick. Okay, they found that in the hill of dirt and rubble that they cleaned up and removed, and they brought it out in front of the pyramid and set it on 6 baseball-sized stones. And when you look at it, you see that there's a very large arc at the very top where the stone has been broken. But behind that arc, it's smooth to the touch. And if you look real close, you can actually see the feed lines from the saw as it was removing material. I took pictures of it, of course.
Of course.
And when I got home, me and my wife were at Menards. That's a home supply store.
Yeah.
And I was walking through the tile area and saw a tile granite, and picked it up off the shelf and turned it around and looked at it. And the marks on the back of that granite tile at Menards looked identical to the marks on the stone at Abu Rawash. So it's kind of like, okay, all right. Civilization X had power tools. They most certainly did. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah. I just and there are drill marks too. There are you can see, but the drill marks aren't something from something being pounded in. It's like it was a power drill going in. And I
Yes.
told you before when we were talking, we saw markings like that on at least one of the chambers that we went into, that nobody knows how old they are or where they came from or who made them. I'm not saying they're from Civilization X, but I am saying that they were corbelled construction, which would. And the colonists certainly were not trained in corbelled construction, nor did they have the time to do something like that. They were too busy trying to live. So that there's technology that has been out there, and you have all of your out of place artifacts that people keep finding, and then they just throw them in that little bin marked out of place objects and kind of forget about them. But they existed. They were utilized. They were, there are remnants of your Civilization X all over the world.
Well, the Great Pyramid is not a remnant. I have been thinking about this. Yeah, it's. I've been thinking about this for a really long time, and if it weren't for the Great Pyramid, there really would be no reason to research ancient Egypt. I mean,
the
Great Pyramid is such an enigmatic structure, mind-boggling structure. You can throw in all the adjectives you want to the Great Pyramid; they're all true. It's evidence that exists right here, right now, and you can fly to Egypt and see it if you want. And when you get there, your jaw drops, because how big it looked on TV, as opposed to being there in real life, is the difference between watching a high school football game and going to a professional football game. It's totally different.
Now the capstone is not there. The capstone, there was a capstone. Supposedly it was gold, correct?
That's correct. It was a gold capstone, and that was for conductivity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone. It's gone. The gold pieces in the king's chamber too. There was a piece in the king's chamber through the southern shaft. There was supposed to be a large gold, kind of like satellite dish-looking thing, and it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, whoever the first people that got into the pyramid here, we're talking probably around the 9th, 10th, 11th century, 1,000 years ago. Whoever got in, the first people to get into the pyramid, they took all the high value items. All the gold is gone. So yeah.
Well, the great hallway with the marks, the places for there to be stairs or whatever, or when you described going up that hallway, even though it's terribly, terribly tall, when I was reading you're going into it, I felt claustrophobic. Yeah,
you have to crawl on your hands and knees. Yeah, it's there's an ascending passage that you got to crawl on your hands and knees. It's a pretty steep angle too. This is not a slow lollygag angle. It's fairly steep. It was a 45-degree, maybe even a little bit more than 45-degree angle. You have to crawl through on your hands and knees until you get to the grand gallery, or then you can actually stand up and walk the rest of the way. But yeah, it's if you're claustrophobic in any way, I don't recommend going into the Great Pyramid.
No, I would I like to? Yes, but I am claustrophobic. So I had a friend who went. And she looked at me and she said, "You wouldn't make it 10 feet in." Probably not. And to have a panic attack in a place where I could wave my arms around and to know I had to crawl on hands and knees to get out, nope. I would definitely. And
the good news is you're with a whole bunch of people, so.
Yeah, well.
I mean, if something happened, you'd have help.
Yeah, no, well, that means that they're just breathing all the air. So, no, I have good claustrophobia. But it seems to me that there is a sense of antiquity and time that must sink into you when you're inside of that pyramid, because I just can't imagine. What it would be like. But there is one other thing. Now, it has a box in it. They call it a sarcophagus. Is it a sarcophagus or is it just a box in the king's chamber?
It's just a box. It's just a box. There's no reason to believe it's a sarcophagus. Yes, it's in the shape of a sarcophagus. That is true. But a lot of things are in the shape of a sarcophagus. Anyway, it's just an oblong box. There's no lid. The top of the box, the edges of the box is rounded. It's not nice and clean and neat and perfect like most of the granite boxes are. It's just a box up there. And
is there
no one really knows what it's for.
So there's no purpose to it as far as being a pulse engine or anything like that. There's no purpose to have a box.
Well, there is a purpose. There is a reason why there's a box there, because there were boxes found in other pyramids, and there was even a sealed box found that the Egyptologists thought was a casket, a grave. And this was 1925, I believe, and with great fanfare. A bunch of dignitaries got together and they went down there, and this box was sealed. This granite box was sealed, and they broke the seal and opened it up. Guess what was in it?
Nothing.
Nothing. Not a thing. Nothing.
But they had that same. Well, there were rose quartz boxes in some pyramids, but
right.
and then there are the huge boxes, sarcophagi, for the Apis bulls that they only found one Apis bull in there, and I don't even know how they got those in there.
Yeah, that's even more crazy. The size of those boxes and the weight of those boxes this is where you have to say there definitely was a Civilization X, because the boxes in the Serapeum at Saqqara are even more than mind-boggling. I mean, the other boxes of the other pyramids, and there was two beautiful boxes at Abu Sur that were still there in situ. I mean, perfect. I mean, one had a broken lid. Someone had busted the lid. But the perfection of these granite boxes is something we can do now, but it costs a lot of money to do it. So, again, you can't do this with a hammer and a chisel. There's no way that it can be done.
These boxes, like the rose quartz ones, now they were in pyramids, so that they had to have had some sort of purpose.
Yes, there was some sort of electromagnetic effect that they were using them for. It's just that we have no idea what that is at this point in time.
Well, obviously the rose quartz is, that's quartz too. But the others were granite, right?
Well, granite has quartz in it.
Yeah.
That's what granite is.
Well, yeah. So would rose quartz be as conductive as granite?
Yes, it would, probably even more so.
Wow.
Well, but what's different about granite, okay, is granite is used today by the high fidelity industry. Granite makes a great base, a great platform for stereo equipment.
Yeah.
So the whole idea there is the granite is being used because its ability to deal with sound. That's where that comes in. Whereas the rose quartz, maybe they didn't really need the whole sound effect thing and used it.
Well, if indeed it was to create a bubble, to make the fields more abundant, to make the seeds more abundant, that would correspond with the towers in Ireland that were
correct.
That had a similar purpose theoretically, but they probably don't date to the same time frame, do they?
No, they don't. No. Those towers in Ireland and in other parts of the world, for that matter, they're much newer than the Great Pyramid. Well, it's the same thing with the non-electric water pump, the Ram style pump, that most people have forgotten about today, but it was used 1,000 years ago. It was used 500 years ago before there was electricity everywhere. It's just we people have a habit of not caring about history and not remembering anything. Generations that are born today, they grow up thinking the world has been as it always is, and it's not.
But how simple to have something like this set up around your fields if you're a farmer. I mean, it they have the great big windmills and they have all sorts of, irrigation stuff going on, but if you surrounded your fields, I mean, and it isn't just for plants, it's animals as well. Things thrive around this kind of an energetic. So, if indeed if this worked so well for ancient Egypt, of course it doesn't work now because there's no water going into the Great Pyramid.
Right.
Could they reinstate it? Could they actually put it back into functionality?
Well, that's going to cost $40 billion. that's the problem right there. Ancient. This is a kind of a thought that I have had for many years now that I would love to see happen. If I were a billionaire, okay, if I were a billionaire, I would spend money and have a scale model of the pyramid built. I mean, it's not going to be 300 feet high, okay? I don't have the money to do one 300 feet high, but I'd have the money to build one, say, 50 feet high, okay? The principles are the same. The materials are the same. I would build a pyramid 50 feet high, exactly how it's supposed to be from, the blueprints of the Great Pyramid, and I would, direct the construction to be like, we got a water pump, the subterranean chamber, and we got we got everything that's going on as it should. I would have it built to see what happens and turn it on. That's really the only way to find out.
But when you think of the poverty in the world and people starving, and if all it takes is getting some of these structures set up in strategic places so that farmland could be brought back and people could be fed, it would be worth the money.
Well, not for the corporations, it wouldn't. They wouldn't have any profit anymore.
Okay. It's a Tesla situation, I guess.
That's correct. Well, yeah. I would talk about Tesla. Let's talk about UFOs just for 30 seconds. Okay. There's been UFO sightings everywhere. The triangular UFOs and this and that. It's been on radar and stuff. Thousands of people have seen these things over the past 20, 30 years. Okay. Well,
20, 30, hundreds.
Man, a lot longer than that. At least back till 1947.
Okay.
Actually, there was one airship sighting in 1895. I think somewhere in Kansas, some strange place like that. But anyway, of course, our government has black projects. We all know that. The SR-117 and the Blackbird and the Stealth Fighter and Bomber. They were all black projects out in Area 51 for a long time before they were finally unveiled to the public. Who do you think the government is going to follow research on? Nikola Tesla or Albert Einstein? They're not going to choose Einstein because Einstein was a theorist. He was a pure theorist.
Yes. But yeah. But they are now using Tesla energy.
They've been using Tesla stuff for a long time. They grabbed all of his patents as soon as he was dead.
Well, they killed him.
I'm sure about that.
Oh yeah, all of his notebooks were not found for sure.
No, he was brilliant. He was a genius.
He was also
crazy.
Understood
plasma. He understood plasma physics back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, when no one understood plasma physics.
He was absolutely an anachronism.
Yeah, and he died a poor, broken man. That's just awful. Yeah. J.P. Morgan and Thomas Edison got away with it.
Oh God.
They did. They made a ton of money.
In 1943, 44, my father was in the FBI, and he was sent out to Long Island. They lived in New York, to watch a demonstration. And they brought a brand new car out. They put water into the gas tank. They put a little white pill into the gas tank, and the car started up and ran like crazy.
Yeah.
No exhaust, no nothing. The government had the copyright, had the patent, bought it from the man, and it's with the Ark of the Covenant someplace in God knows where.
My best friend from high school told me a story similar to that. He's been living in Indiana for the past 30 years, and of course he made friends in Indiana. This one friend, this is going back to the early 80s. His dad bought a big boat of a car, like a big 4-door Buick, a 400 cubic inch engine on it. Anyway, it had a 4-barrel carburetor on it. And the boys, asked Dad if they could use the car during the weekend. And the boys were nice boys. Dad was a nice dad. So he let the boys use the car. And they drove the car all weekend. And they noticed the gas needle barely moved. And they did it again the next weekend. Again, the same thing happened. The gas needle barely moved. Well, not too long after that, his dad got a letter from the manufacturer. I don't know if it was a Buick or a Chevy or what, but anyway, he got a letter from the manufacturer explaining to him that his vehicle had an experimental carburetor on it and that he needed to promptly go to the dealer and have that carburetor removed and the correct carburetor installed, all for free. Of course, he didn't do it.
Oh, wow. You sit back and you wonder why. I mean, I understand. You follow the money. It's big corporations. I got that. But there's so much in this world that could be fixed so rapidly and so easily. And
this is true. Yes.
It boggles the mind, and of course then you've got the guy that touched the drone from the future in Rendlesham Forest, who got a download of the ones and the zeros. Can't remember what it's called. The name is just now gone, but they interpreted it, and it turned out it was a message from the future from 800 years. So
I haven't heard of this. Is this the Rendlesham Forest incident back in the late 70s or early 80s?
Pennington, Pendleton, Patterson, Jim. Yeah, he's been on the show. He talked about it's the binary code. He touched this and it was like a drone. He ran his hand over it. He got a download of energy. He wrote all this down in a notebook. The government never asked him for the notebook. He didn't mention it, so he kept it. And somebody noticed that it was binary code, and they actually were able to interpret it. And
so what did it say?
It, among other things, it had sacred sites from the latitude and longitude of sacred sites around the world. And now the message, I am going to not say it right, but basically it said human experiment or human whatever progressing, and date of report, and the date was 800 years in our future. And
wow.
Yeah, I mean, and it's fascinating to read the whole thing. I think there was more in the message, and he has another book, obviously, but it makes sense. I could see sending a drone into the past, trying to warn people about stuff. So that makes more sense to me than aliens.
Well,
for sure.
I've had that thought myself. I don't bring aliens into it. But after studying Egypt and Mesopotamia and myths for the past 20, 25 years, I do have a good vision of creation in my mind, and it started out with water. I mean, our planet is a water planet. I mean, it's 80% water. We're 80% water. There's no doubt about that. And I understand how everything works, how the electric universe and the electric currents have a habit, as they increase in energy, they have a habit of pinching themselves and creating plasmoids. And these plasmoids create their own electromagnetic fields and become their own thing. And I can see how our planet is being born out of what's called an electromagnetic Z-pitch to create a plasmoid. And as long as that plasmoid is being fed, by Birkeland currents, those are twin currents moving through space, how that planet is being fed, or star for that matter, is being fed by Birkeland currents, that it's creating matter. I mean, this seems to be what happens when electricity is being moved and amplified through a system like a planet or a star. It actually creates matter. So I can see our planet being created. Go ahead.
Yeah, but in a way, the energy that all of us are magnifying is in many ways feeding the planet.
Well, it's the planet's feeding us. We are actually part of the planet.
Yeah.
We are actually a growth out of the planet, just like all the animals and plants are. Okay, but what I was getting to is that the ancient Egyptians said, and I have to paraphrase because I don't remember identically how it's said, but the ancient Egyptians said that when creation occurred, everything for life was in the water. Everything.
Huh.
Okay, so this is where I kind of unload myself at is, okay, I understand physically how our planet was born and how, we have an electromagnetic shield and the atmosphere and all that, and then we have life. However, the monster question is, where did the DNA come from?
Yeah. well, that makes for another radio show. I just noticed the time. I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I know you're really busy.
You're very welcome, Barbara. It's a pleasure.
But this has been a lot of fun. I sent you an email with what it is I've got, and if you want it, let me know. I want to thank you, and thank you for all your work, and thank you for all your books, and thank you for making people think and wonder and hopefully research. But I do hope to get you on again to take this further. Of course, I have to read another book.
I would love to. This book I'm working on right now, I'm about 83,000 words in. I hope to have it submitted by May of 2021. And this next book is really, I've got the goods for this next book. I have the proof. I have the proof that the Mesopotamians were actually tracking and writing down the planet's movements. Okay,
we're gonna have to talk.
And yeah, it's phenomenal. The evidence has always been there, Barbara. It's people have ignored it.
Well, I will be checking in with you. I've got to scoot because my time is up here. So thank you again, and I will be in touch. And thank you.